Persona 3 is an embarrassment. What do I mean by that? Well, this is a review. I'm going to be trying to review all the Persona games I've played, which is 3 onwards. And I don't think this game is good. I think it's an embarrassment to the rest of the series and to all future entries, despite it being the first modern Persona game. And I'm going to show you my ranking system and how I'm going to be rating this game. It's an out of 10 ranking system, with the things on screen being the things I consider the core of a Persona game, which only accounts for 9 out of 10 score. There will be an additional 1 point for music, because I don't think that is something that is fundamental for a game to be good, but is a small nice touch, and I think any masterpiece of a game should still have a good soundtrack you will actively listen to. Persona 3 plays atrociously. Now, this is going to be a repeat as part of my Persona 4 review, but I do not like the randomly generated dungeons in Persona games. Especially in these ones that are partly 3D, because they're just hallways with the occasional turn or fork in the road. It's just hallways. Now, this has more variation in the path than Persona 4, oddly enough, but it's still boring. Persona 4 manages to spruce it up with unique themes and actually visual aesthetic. Hope you like the colors blue and green, because this is all you'll be seeing for the nearly 300 floors of Tartarus. Yeah, Tartarus alone removes like 2 points from the gameplay department. So the dungeons suck. But there are some good dungeons in the game. Specifically, the very few that are scripted story events. For example, the hotel is, yes, it's small, but it is actually really fun and engaging. Who would have thought? The dungeon you actually made an actual layout for, instead of just being random lines. The minimap is so janky. You can just constantly see cuts in the minimap everywhere where the room's loaded. It's not smooth at all. And then there's the combat. Where do I begin with the combat? It is slow. Now, I will say this. I played with a mod that allowed me to control the party members. But arguably, I don't think that should be something that is required via a mod, as it was included in both portable and every future Persona game, and would likely be included in a Steam re-release of Persona 3. So, I don't really think it matters. But the combat is so slow. Fusion spells are a good idea on the surface, but also, why would I carry specific personas for abilities that aren't honestly that good? Like, they can be useful in the early game, but by the late game, you'll just have heavy-hitting spells of the element the enemy's weak to on basically no matter what, as you should have a variety of personas. And oh no, they aren't weak to anything I have. Almighty skills. Now, and again, the combat is atrociously slow. The animations take so long, and I don't know why. You can't skip them, they take a while. Menuing's slow and clunky, which giving the menuing issue was really only fixed in Persona 5, and then SMT5 went back to the old menuing style, which makes no sense to me. But I don't think it's a big deal, because no matter what, the combat system's slow. So the menu don't matter. And the thing is, there's such a simple solution to the problem of the slow menuing. Let me press the X or cross button during an animation to skip it. This is a very simple solution. So simple, SMT5 has it. And yes, I'm comparing this a lot to newer games, but also they're newer Atlus games, so they're still maybe the same developer, and I think Atlus knows, like, one, I think they knew by this point controllable party members were important, as one of the two enhanced versions of this game has it, in Persona 3 Portable. So, the gameplay is awful. The times it tries to do something really cool, like with scripted dungeons, are great. The puzzles in them aren't good. And frankly, shuffle time is the worst I've seen it. Now, I hate shuffle time in both Persona 3 and 4. I prefer it in 4 because there is some strategy to it, but it isn't fun. It's just, oh, you want a battle? Here, you might get a persona. But shadow negotiations have always been better. They are in the older SMT games, so there isn't really an excuse, other than watering down the formula solely to make this easier. Which, another problem with difficulty is grinding. The game expects you to go to Tartarus every single night. What sane person goes to Tartarus on a nightly basis? Anyway, let's move on to the story. Persona 3 has a relatively strong story. While not being one of my favorites of the series, it still has a ton of extremely memorable moments. And I don't think the story's all that bad. It tackles darker themes than I think that works out. And it has, in my opinion, the worst cast of Persona characters out of the 3 games in the series I've played. Well, 3 mainline games. And I'll talk about more in the social link section, but it does have more weak party members. Not weak physically, just ones I really don't care for. Even my least favorite party members in other Persona games, I still have tons of things I would love to say about them, and most of them could still at least get a 5-minute section in a video that's positive. When a decent chunk of characters in this, I really don't like. And again, I'll talk about them in their own sections, but I think the story in this game is quite good, ignoring some massive parts of missed potential, and actually, the rest of this video will be spoilers, so you're warned? First up, this game's twist villain, the Chairman. I really hated how he was handled. The twist villains in this series are normally some of my favorite characters in their respective games due to their incredibly amazing characters, especially after they've been revealed as the twist villain, i.e. Cabbage Boy and Pancakes. Those two are amazing characters, and I love them both before they're revealed as the antagonist and after, but more specifically after, because once they are revealed, it is hilarious. They have so many good lines of dialogue, and it's just amazing to see their true colors shine and see why their voice actors were truly chosen for this role. But the Chairman gets revealed as the antagonist and immediately dies. Like, here's an idea. And I don't think this messes with the story too much. But the Chairman gets revealed as the antagonist, and it turns out he's secretly been working with Strega the whole time. And he's actually the leader of Strega. So then, he's basically leaking all your information. That way, Strega can still get a steady information on what Seize is doing, even after Shinjiro passes. Do I think that's the best course of action for the character? No. But I think that's probably the best thing you can do without heavily altering the story or themes. And, frankly, I think that does a great job at fixing one of my biggest complaints with the story. But, speaking of Strega, they're fine antagonists. I don't have any majorly negative feelings towards them or positive. Why am I not including them in the character section? I would consider characters that are mostly there for story purposes to be in the story section, while characters that actually get fleshed out as actual characters and less of plot vices to get their own unique section. And frankly, only really one of the members of Strega gets fleshed out as a character. Chidori. Tayaka and Jin just feel more like plot vessels. They want to bring forth the coming of Nynx, but they really don't have any plot significance outside of forcing crowds to agree with them. And here's the problem with this. The want for the world to end and the despair doesn't matter except for in the answer. They push the plot forward, but not for the plot of the story they're in, the plot for the epilogue, which wasn't even written yet. But either way, the story is quite nice, with, albeit, still a remarkably uninteresting final boss, with 13 unique phases, and some decent twists, but nothing major that I think makes this game stand out aside from its darker themes. And I don't think this is a bad thing. It's an enjoyable game that's carried mostly by its characters, with the story segments outside of them not being that interesting. But I don't think Persona 5's story would be that interesting either without its characters. Because these games, while having strong stories, and I would still give this one a strong story, are almost exclusively carried by the characters that hold it. On comparison, first, we should talk about the gameplay social link system in the game. Unlike 4, and especially 5, there is no reason aside from the stories of the characters and this slight XP boost personas get of that arcana to do these. 4 has a few more reasons and a few more things party members can do, but it's only party members in that game, and in 5, there's a reason to do everyone. But 4 is the game that started this trajectory. And I think the writing in the social links is quite good in this game. Except for one major problem with their gameplay. Social links can expire, so to speak. If you do not hang out with someone for at least 60 days, your social link will become either broken or reversed. If it's reversed, you need to hang out with them a few more times before it can begin again, and if it's broken, you can never progress that social link again. I don't know why. And then, there is what is, in my opinion, the stupidest mechanic I've ever seen regarding social links. Any woman the same age as you will, once again, have 60 days before you can hang out with them again. But if you hang out with another woman, that time will go down by 15 days. So theoretically, hanging out with 4 women, so you can literally break a friendship with someone that you just talked to in 4 days by hanging out with a couple other women, which is ridiculous. Platonic friendships are a thing. And then, here's another thing. You have to date if you reach level 10 with someone of the opposite gender. And this is even worse in freaking Portable, where you can date a 5-year-old. But now it's time to talk about the characters. Since we already mentioned them, let's start with all 3 members of Strega. As I said, Tayaka really doesn't have much going for him, but I don't mind him. Same case with Jin. They're interesting, and I find the backstory of Strega more interesting than the characters themselves. And as I alluded to earlier, the only one of them that's remotely developed is Chidori. I quite like her. She's pretty interesting and is both deadpan yet shows a surprising amount of emotion. I think her voice actress does an amazing job at this, and frankly, I have very little complaints regarding Chidori's character. She's a side character, so doesn't get to do much, and does end up sacrificing herself. But I think the fact that she's one of the few characters that actually grows substantially throughout the course of this game is quite impressive. As, in my opinion, a good few characters in this game really don't change much from point A to B. But Chidori changes from not really showing emotion and not being afraid of death to showing emotion and worrying about her friends' deaths. And I actually wonder what she means by when she says, "Ever since I awakened to my powers, I've known when I was going to die." I don't know what she means by that. But either way, I quite enjoyed her character. Her relationship with Jinpei is sweet, and now I'm going to talk about Jinpei. Now, Jinpei is such an interesting character. He starts off being very aggressive towards the player, since he ended up getting lucky. He ended up getting the wild card. Jinpei is very aggressive towards you. And he eventually grows to accept that, and accept that he's still useful in his own right, and even gets to a point where he accepts, like, I have to fight. Chidori gave me this life. And honestly, his moments with the Chidori are some of the few moments of his character I truly thought were nice and kind. Because he ends up being very aggressive towards the player, which is most of the things you see. And I don't hold this against him. He's jealous. Jealousy is an extremely common emotion. It's more the sole fact that you really don't see much of the side of him that isn't jealousy. That holds him back. I quite enjoyed Yukari and her motivations, as she wants to figure out what happened to her father, who was a former Kirijo Group researcher investigating the shadows. He died when she was 6, and recently got a letter that was meant to go out to her once she turned 16, revealing a bit more about what her father had been doing and the truth to the answer. She can be a bit aggressive and dismissive to the player at first, but she ends up growing to like your company as well as the rest of C's. I quite enjoy her, and she has a small arc throughout the game, but is mostly there as a mirror to Mitsuru, who is up next. Her goal is to both protect her father and redeem the Kirijo Group by stopping the abominations of Tartarus. And the reason I say that she acts as a mirror to Yukari is because they're constantly supporting each other, and they are the only ones who truly actually have a past that goes back to before the creation of Tartarus. Not because they knew each other, but because her grandfather dragged Takaba's family into it. Mitsuru is the de facto leader, barring the use of a character with the wildcard ability. And she is one I quite enjoyed. She, despite being quite strategical and trying to hold emotions out of it, has several moments where she falls to them, especially after her father sacrificed himself to stop the chairman. And this actually led to her being quite the enjoyable character. And I don't think there are many other characters that have that close of a connection to them. And frankly, seeing how Mitsuru recruited everyone was quite the interesting sight. Similarly, how she introduced Akihiko to Seize. How she introduces him to Seize is basically just goes, "Hey, you wanna trade? I have some enemies that need defeating. Not human ones, though." And just hands him a gun. That was genuinely funny. And Akihiko really is just part of Seize to train to become stronger. And I'll talk about this in a future review, actually probably the last one of this series, but his interactions with Chie in Arena are quite enjoyable. But that's not this game, which is less enjoyable. But he's quite enjoyable, and the game forces him to question what he's really fighting for aside from just strength. The answer is just strength. But it makes him think if there is another reason until he accepts that it isn't. Which I think is a fine enough way to do things. Because you do need strength to protect someone. Speaking of whom, there's a character whose goal is only to protect someone. Aigis. Oh boy, I have a lot to say about Aigis. I could have an entire video on why I think she's one of the worst protagonists this series has ever seen, as yes, she does take the protagonist role in the answer. And frankly, it boils down to one thing. The game makes it out to see that she's changed, but she really doesn't grow that much. From the moment that she reawakens from her slumber to the moment the protagonist dies, she is very robotic and doesn't learn. Compare that to another robotic party member from Persona 5, Sophia. Even subtly in her voice, she's constantly getting more human. Now, Aigis does get a little more human in her delivery as the story progresses, but she still really just wants to protect the protagonist, and this bothers me solely on the count that her reasoning for protecting the protagonist is something she doesn't know, and it turns out it's because her job to protect humanity from shadows, because she is literally an anti-shadow weapon, she decided to put what is the summoner of the mother of all shadows, the thing that is one of the parts needed to summon the most powerful shadow of all time, she decides to put that inside a 6-year-old, never tells him, forgets that 6-year-old exists, and is never brought up, so there's just a 6-year-old who happens to embody death. Also, that's the protagonist. Point being, she makes such a stupid decision that makes no sense with both her character, her motivations, and her programming. Yes, you cannot defeat death, but why not seal it in something else? Something that won't release it. No matter how you see it, death was going to release from the protagonist. He will die. Aigis would not. Why would Aigis have not chosen to sacrifice herself to seal death inside of her? Which would then prevent the problem I have with it. And you could still even have the protagonist be the vessel for death. Having the meeting of the two somehow accidentally release death and have it end up in the protagonist. Either way, I guess it's time to talk about death, huh? Pharaohs, Ryoji, Thanatos, Death, whatever you want to call him, he's actually a character I quite enjoyed. All of his forms are fine. I don't have a strong preference, and frankly, I have no strong feelings towards him. He's kind, and I really like him. Just, again, no strong feelings. My strongest feelings towards him relate to why I think Aigis is a horrible character. But I don't have much to say on him. So, let's continue on to the party members. I think another young-looking party member is Ken. I'm gonna keep this brief, because I could make an entire video on why Ken is an awful character. Going into this game, I knew people disliked him. I thought, okay, that's probably a fluke. It's probably nothing. You were trying to write a moody teenager as a 5-year-old. No! That doesn't work. He genuinely bothers me. Like, because of you, I almost committed suicide because you killed my parents. And like, you're 5. I don't even think you understand the concept of suicide. Like, dude, this is ridiculous. You're a kindergartner. Like, genuinely. I don't get it. Who thought this was a good idea? You either have to age him up or make him dumber. Like, I'm not asking for character, like, it's just purely the fact that he has way too much emotional intelligence for a kindergartner. It's not the fact that he has these feelings. It's the fact that they're coming from someone who is in elementary school. When I was in elementary school, I knew like 3 emotions. Sad, lonely, happy. The point being, it's just unrealistic. The only thing about him that's good is his partner, Koromaru. Honestly, I don't have much to say that isn't obvious. He's a dog. I like him. I like dogs. It is sad that he can't talk, but that is more realistic. My main question is, how does a dog both have a persona and have the ability to control it? Like, yes, Morgana's a cat, but also Morgana's like a weird case of flock contrivance. Koromaru is literally just your everyday dog. I don't have a problem with it, I just don't understand it. If that makes sense. And then there is Fuka. I quite like her. She's your support persona user in this game, and in my opinion, is the worst support persona user out of the 3 games. But we are also talking about an archetype in these games, which includes my favorite character in the series, and a character I thoroughly enjoyed all their screen time of. So, Fuka being the worst of an extremely solid group of characters really doesn't say much. I still quite like her, and one of the most baffling things about her to me is just how, once she's handed her evoker, she immediately knows what she needs to do with it. Metis is actually just a better Aigis. It's basically just Aigis, but she removed her emotions. So instead, you have the robotic and uncaring Aigis, and the extremely emotional and reminds me kind of Sophie, Metis. So basically, you removed all the parts I dislike about Aigis, and kept all the parts I did like. There isn't much more to say. Chiharu. I quite like her, but she does cause a bit of confusion, which I'll explain in a sec. But I like her. She has a really nice arc, and I actually really like her social link. I don't have much more to say than that, but I thoroughly enjoyed my time spent with her doing her social link. Now, time for the part I have a question about. You break the timeline. Persona 3 takes place approximately 2-3 years before Persona 4. Maybe. And Persona 4 has the characters visit Gekukan High. Not a big deal, but she's still a student. Enough time has passed for a middle school aged Yukiko to be in, I think her second year of high school? So, I don't understand how. I understand that she was extremely one of the younger members of the student council in Persona 3, but even if we're being generous and saying that Yukiko was in grade 8 during the events of Persona 3 Portable, where she makes a cameo, that would still mean that I think Chihiro should be graduated. I think. It's also hard because I don't know when the Japanese school year starts and ends, because I know it starts weird differently than the North American school year. But I don't know. Either I'm missing something, or this makes no conceivable sense. I don't have a problem with the fact she doesn't look physically different, as at most it's 2-3 years for a high school student. You look a lot different between grade 1 and grade 4, but there isn't as much of a difference between grade 9 and 12. So, I'm not sure. Maybe I'm just stupid. The music. Honestly, it's pretty good. It's my least favorite Persona soundtrack, but I really love 5 and 4's, and it still has some pretty good songs. Both Burn My Dread and Burn My Dread Last Battle are good. A lot of the overworld themes are pretty good. And honestly, one of my bigger complaints is just mass destruction is repetitive. Both because half the lyrics are just baby, 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 baby. And the fact it's the only battle song that plays. This is a problem I have with Persona 5 as well, since it really only has Last Surprise, but at least Royal changed that, adding in Takeover. So, overall, music's pretty good. Let's get into the final ranking. Overall, I'd give Persona 3 a 5 out of 10. It has its flaws, especially in the gameplay department, which in my opinion is where it really counts, but its story, soundtrack, and characters is quite good. Overall, I'd recommend just watching the Persona 3 movies. You get the good parts and ignore the bad parts. Arguably, I should have just done that too. Well, you win some, you lose some.